Hi guys, my name's Adam Sellers from the Pressure Project, and this is Dr. Rob Scott. Today we're going to be diving into depression and also mental illness more broadly. So we put this together because in the world at the moment we're in a position where people are struggling and times are tough. Our 21st century world is very busy, and we quite often don't get time to look after ourselves, and that can affect our mental state and throw us into the grips of mental illness. So my background, I'm a freediving instructor. I'm PADI ambassador diver, instructor trainer. Also have a background in mindfulness meditation and have spent years on training. So what we're trying to do here is bring together something that will be holistic and help in a lot of different ways, not just kind of one avenue that we're quite often given. So that's my background. I compete for Australia in freediving, so my background, or what I bring to this, is the ability to cope with pressure and stress under extreme conditions or depriving your body of oxygen. So yeah, we have Dr. Rob Scott. You know he's a doctor because he's wearing a stethoscope. So yeah.
G'day guys, my name's Rob. As Adam said, I'm a GP, or I'm a doctor. I'm working as a GP at the moment. My background is that I've been trained in Queensland and finished my fellowship recently. Personally I've had a fair bit of experience with mental health, and I deal with it with my patients every day, but also with myself. You know, it's a constant battle for all of us, as Adam said, in this time when there is a lot of a crisis around us. You know, there's a lot of anxiety, and we can decompensate. And so this chat today is probably about how we combat that.
So Rob and I met through the freediving world, but we also came together on this project because we've got something in common. We've both battled with depression more broadly, but also had our spurts of anxiety, anxiety attacks, or however that comes. And freediving as a sport that brought us together is a sport or recreation in itself, where it holds up to the mirror to you very quickly and shows you how you deal with stress and anxiety and all that sort of thing. Because in terms of hierarchy of human needs, oxygen's number one. We can go a long time without food and water and even shelter and all these things, but you take oxygen away from a human and you see very quickly how they deal with stress and pressure and anxiety and all that sort of stuff. So I suppose first, Rob, what was your experience with when you first got your first spout of depression?
I guess I was about 20, and it was that time when you're sort of just out of home and you're exploring the world and probably drinking too much. Yeah. But it was the main big event that probably was a catalyst for me was a loss of a good mate of mine in a car crash. Yep. And that was really when I sort of started to spiral, and at that time had really no discernible techniques for managing it, and was just kind of at the mercy of this thing that was happening. It's funny to think back on it now, but it is all consuming. You kind of, I think, struggle at the time, and you think you've got it under control. You think you're doing certain things, but have no idea, or I had no idea about the things that I was doing that was making it worse. Alcohol's a big one, but even the way you interact with the people around you when you're depressed is very different. It's a uniquely introspective thing, and that's a nice way of saying we're very selfish when we're very depressed. I think we're kind of very all consumed, and the people around us, sometimes are looking at this and going, wow, what are you come on. It's a difficult thing for people to be around, and naturally your relationships suffer, and not having the wisdom in my 20s to I think alter that was it was a big spiral. And sought help from doctors, and sought help from friends, and tried to read, but it was a long time, even a long
So yeah, like how long did that like the first time, was it like a year, or was it like a couple of months that you really felt trapped or? You
Yeah,
know?
it was probably a year that first time.
Yeah.
It was really awful, and then kind of it slowly dissipated, I suppose, with the change in circumstance. You know, changing cities or moving out, or changing other things to try and remedy it, which helped for a little while. But then when I was placed again in another stressful situation when I was at medical school, I decompensated again, and
Yeah.
it's easy in hindsight to see that that's how it played out. It was that pressure cooker of the medical training that made me decompensate again, having those not enough techniques
Yeah.
to manage.
So when you say decompensate, like tell the people that are watching, I suppose, what does that mean for you? Like how did you decompensate, do you think? Like what are the things that you would do when you got into that state?
Well, both, I guess, reflecting on my own experience, it was that I stopped going out, stopped eating properly, stopped exercising, and as a doctor, I think of that. Those are signs I look for in my patients, where their self-care just deteriorates,
Yeah.
and that's when you're in a bit of a positive feedback loop where you just get worse and worse and worse, and your behaviour makes it worse, and then you reflect on your behaviour and feel worse again,
Yeah.
and it goes around.
Yeah.
So decompensation from, I guess I'm saying, that loss of self-care, the slow deterioration in the
Yeah.
way that you function.
Yeah.
Can't go to work, can't go to school, those sorts of things.
Yeah, so I mean, from my point of view as well, it sounds very similar. I think, in a word, I would just call it debilitating. For me, I probably got it quite late, in the sense that I was probably about 27, 28 years old or something, always kind of been happy and like everything's under control, and then all of a sudden I just wasn't. And I suppose the hardest thing is that if you couldn't track down someone that had been in depression or had struggled with some form of mental illness, people just didn't understand. And sometimes it's your nearest and dearest, like your closest, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, whatever. And they just don't understand, It was like, oh, Ads, chin up, you'll be all right. Go to the gym or something,
We all have highs and lows.
Yeah, exactly. Chin up was the biggest one. I just kept going, oh, that'll help. Let's try that. No, still not good. So it was debilitating, but the problem is that it was that searching for answers and not getting any answers really that I found frustrating, because it wasn't like things in the past where you go like, oh, I sprained my ankle. Okay, well, rest, ice, compression, elevation, and it'll come good. It was
You need a plan.
Yeah, exactly. So, for me, it was the not having the answers, being debilitating in terms of I was always someone who wrote a list of things to do in the morning and just tick them off, and then one thing in my diary would look like Everest, and it wouldn't even be a hard thing. I just sit there and look at it.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe if I go for a walk and I'll come back and it'll be okay. At the time, kids, had my own business, and things actually weren't going that well in my relationship. So it was just the search for me was, culminated in me realizing some years later that it was my inability to deal with the pressures of life that put me into that. But at the time, and this is I suppose the overwhelming message is like, you're not alone in this. So many people suffer from this, but they suffer in silence. So part of this was just to get our story out, let you know that you're not alone, but also, I suppose the next topic, or what we're going to get into the teeth of this, is we're going to go through, and this is what Rob runs through in with being a doctor, which is fantastic, and he calls it the 5 pillars. Is we're going to go through these 5 pillars and show a more holistic way of approaching this, because it's so serious. The mental illness at the moment is like an epidemic in itself, and so we're going to really get into Rob's 5 pillars that he works with. Which, when I sat down with him about something completely different, my foot, we started talking about this type of thing, and I just went, wow, I wish that because when I went in to see the GP, I rang one of the hotlines first, and they just said, see your GP. When I saw my GP, it was just, here's a Band-Aid, here's some antidepressants, go. I wished at the time that I had these 5 pillars that showed me some hope in ways that weren't just medication. So
I had a similar experience, I think, early on, with seeing doctors and even seeing psychologists and psychiatrists, and sort of just kept searching, and no one could really give me a tangible plan, a tangible way to attack it. And I think that was where this 5 pillars came from. It was I figured out that doing exercise or doing movement seemed to help, and that I had to focus on what I consumed, and that there were other aspects of my life that I could really tweak that changed the sensation, changed the experience of depression, and that's kind of where this came from. And patients seem to appreciate, as you said, having some sort of plan, having a goal, and it's not just antidepressants have their place, but it's not just that one tool.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a really good point. I mean, what I found, and what I still find in my journey, is that I cope so much better, and I have the coping mechanisms that I was lucky enough to find through a sport like freediving and the meditation side. But what I think is that there's no actual cure.
Yeah.
You just manage it. You just get to the point where you manage it better, and the spouts of whatever you deal with get shorter and not as hard. Like Rob was saying that his first spout was like maybe a year, and I remember mine was probably roughly about 8 months, and mine was the same. A change of circumstance. I got a new a job, an opportunity, and I went, oh, this is amazing, and then all of a sudden I was like happy again. I was like, oh, how did that happen? But then some way down the track again, there I was again, and it was like the next time was like 4 months, and then it was like 3 months, and then sometimes now it's like a couple of weeks. So I think what a lot of this stuff is not necessarily, we're not looking for the cure, we're not going to give you a magic pill, we can't do that, but it's about you manage it better, and the things that trigger you, and then the things that also help you get out of it, if that kind of makes sense.
You get more acute, you jump onto it more quickly, and you start applying those things really rapidly. So you dig yourself out of it much more quickly. And it is interesting to think about there's no cure, but it's not kind of too nihilistic to think that there's no cure. There's no cure for many things. Epilepsy is something that's managed with different things. There's lifestyle factors that make it worse. There's medication that helps.
Flicking lights.
But it doesn't kind of go away. That's right. Just stay away from the lights. But it's but nobody beats themselves up for managing that in a certain way, and with medicines or with lifestyle or with their behaviour. And there's no cure, and that's not a terrible thing. It's something we live with, and
it's that management of it.
But it can be a tiny aspect of your life. It can be something that there is light at the end of the tunnel with this plan.
Cool. So that's us. That's our background, and so what I suppose we're going to do from here is really get into the nuts and bolts of this. And I hope you guys enjoy it. It's going to be raw. It's just a couple of guys, having a coffee at a table. But this is also significant, the way we've actually set this up, because this is how these conversations, I feel, should go. If you are struggling, call one of your good mates, call a family member, say, hey, put a cuppa on, I just want to come over and have a chat. And this is what you should be doing. Have a chat about it. It helps. If you're not the person struggling, you don't have to solve their problem. You just need to have your listening ears on and acknowledge what they're going through and all the rest of it. You don't have to solve it. I think that's one of the overriding things that I found, was that people were trying to solve what was wrong with me. And it wasn't something, it's not a murder investigation. It's something that's going on in the brain that the brain is a wonderful thing, but we don't get an owner's manual. So it can be quite hard to manage. So next up, we're going into the 5 pillars that Rob put together. So